Okay. Hello? Hey, I'm good. Really good.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm super stoked to be here.
Okay. Yeah. So let me know if you
You
guys
got a
can hear
vamp.
me.
You got a vamp.
Yeah, totally. I don't know, Brandon, if you guys can hear Brandon and I, let us know. Give us a thumbs up, gnome, because I think we're not on the chat right now. But I think that was my third time this week watching it. You know, a chance to see it a couple times. Really interesting. Brandon, what about you? Have you watched it a couple times recently?
Yeah, it's tough to find a time. So every time I've watched it, it's actually been super late at night because we have a little one at home, so we don't want to freak her out. But yeah, I've had a chance to check it out, and yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I think Noam put together a really good piece.
How interesting is it to revisit it after such a long time? Because I feel like we saw a cut maybe a couple like earlier this year, you know, and on set you think about what it's going to be like, and you know you kind of expect it a certain way. I was super happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said, Noam put together a fantastic film with some really good talent. Obviously, yourself included in that, and Matteo handled Noam's vision, I think, really, really well. And so that's always the roll of the dice, right? I think that pretty famously, Daniel Day-Lewis has said it's a miracle that any film gets made, let alone made well, because there's just so many components that go into it. So from the experience on set, knowing what kind of you and I had talked about, oh wow, this is feeling really good, I think this is really working, to the first version that we were privy to what is now final. I think.
Yeah, you know, I am not on the chat, but let me go through that right now. Brandon, are you on it? Let's see. This Q and A. Let's see. I'm curious what everyone's questions are, and what a lot of the comments. Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. So I play Alice's husband in the film, and it was a really special experience because personally in my life, at that point in my life, my partner and I had just kind of settled into new parenthood, and so it was a really interesting opportunity for me to bring together that personal experience with an artistic experience, kind of for the first time in a real way. So it was really exciting for me to get to navigate the script and the various elements of drama that Alice and her husband experienced through that, with the personal perspective of what a strain on a relationship could be.
I think
so a unique and special experience.
I think hopefully this is working finally. You guys hearing this? I unmuted, so hopefully this is coming through. I think I was muted after all that.
And it's funny because we can hear you, but
let's see. Can someone confirm, Katrina, if you can hear me, if you can respond, let me know. I see a yay, so I think that means you guys can hear me.
Yay! All
okay.
right, cool.
All right, I'm gonna pretend you guys can hear. So, perfect. Okay. So sorry about that, guys. I guess I'm a little burned out after 2 years of making this movie. I cannot even get my microphone plugged in. But first of all, I just wanted to say, because I didn't get to say this before I was muted, thank you guys all for joining us for the screening online, the Q&A. Honestly, to me, this was one of the most kind of fun parts of the process literally tonight, because as you know, obviously we couldn't do any sort of premiere or anything in person for obvious reasons, and this is just kind of a treat for all of us to have you here watching and enjoying. And you know, this is a tiny little movie, very much a labor of love from all of us. So anyway, cannot appreciate you guys enough for being here. One thing to mention, and again, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I mentioned this earlier on the chat, but I'm doing a contest right now because we're trying to drive up the reviews for this movie. It really helps us just reach a much bigger audience on Amazon. So if you guys liked the film and you want to rate and review it, please do so. And if you send me an email at info@gnomekroll.com after the fact, I'm going to enter you guys into a contest to win a Blackmagic Pocket Camera Original, $250 to B&H, and a whole bunch of other prizes like courses from my website, my LUTs, and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, if you guys feel up for it, I really appreciate that. Also want to mention that my wife here, Jennifer, is with us. She's going to be moderating this Q&A. We've had some questions that have been written in over the last few months, or few days, sorry, I should say, but since we released the film. And I've just been kind of compiling them with Jen. So she's going to run through them with Stephanie and Brandon and myself. Matteo, our DP, hopefully will be joining us here soon. He's in Italy. It's like 4 a.m. or something there. So we're trying to get him up. So hopefully he's going to be here momentarily. But I think to kick things off, I'd love to just jump straight into the questions that we have prepared. And then we're going to start taking as much. Some people are saying we have an echo. Hopefully that goes away. But then we'll start taking some more questions from you guys. So let's start here. Jen, if you have any questions, maybe something for Stephanie.
Yeah, I was going to say the first question is for Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie.
Hey.
Can you talk a bit about what you did to get into the headspace of Alice while preparing for the role?
Yeah, absolutely. I have mentioned to Noam and you guys before that I booked 2 films almost like end to end. So I finished one film that was a really high intense energy horror action film that every single day was screaming and running and fighting and, you know, fake explosions, and it was so much energy every single day. And then a week later, just, you know, after that, I got onto set for Psychosynthesis, and it was almost for me a like the explosion outward of all the energy was then this was the inward, you know, recoiling back to myself energetically, and to prepare for this role, it was just a lot of rehearsal, and I think, like, especially we did some black box rehearsals together, myself and my other actors, Brandon included, that were super helpful, that really, you know, just knowing the other people you're working with, knowing what they're like, how you're going to work together. And one of the most brilliant things for me in the film was the contrast between my 2 male co-stars and just how different they were.
Awesome. That's great. 1 second here. Okay. By the way, if you guys do hear an echo, let me know. I think it's my mic again, so I'm trying to mute it and unmute it as we go. But yeah, so I'd love to just continue that kind of conversation with now Brandon. I know we had a lot of questions just generally on performance and preparation and stuff like that. So yeah, Jen, what do you have next? Anything for Brandon from the audience that we want to jump into here?
Yeah, we have a few. The most challenging scene to shoot and why?
The most challenging scene to shoot and why? Well, I think that would actually be like a bit of a trick question, because what I think people may, at least for my character anyway, for Jacob's character, consider the most difficult scene to shoot would be that kind of climactic scene at the very end of the film where I'm in a state of panic worrying about Alice and where she is. I can't find her. But that actually was not the most difficult scene to shoot. I think the more difficult scenes to shoot for me personally were the more kind of calmer, slower family scenes between Olive and Alice and I, in which we were really trying to bring that family life to the screen and really trying to capture that in an accurate way that was able to show that this family unit is struggling. And those were the ones that were really, really difficult, I think, at least for me personally, because that's a really tough subject matter, right? Is feeling like your family is collapsing around you. That's terrifying, and that's a special kind of hard. But to play those scenes truthfully, one note, accurate to the story that Noam was trying to tell, I found that was frankly the most challenging and a worthwhile challenge as well.
That's a great answer too, because it's funny, I've never heard you kind of express it that way, but from my perspective, I think those were kind of the more challenging scenes as well, because everything else, was pretty clear, the paintbrush that we were using to tell this story. We wanted obviously to feel kind of dark and moody and atmospheric and dip into maybe some genre territory. But then there were also these very kind of like real moments between the two characters that were supposed to feel almost like they could have come out of a drama or something else. So trying to figure out how to fit that in without it feeling like, so jarring to the audience that that we're going from genre sort of intense horror-esque kind of thriller into those more, just relationship moments, I think is a difficult, gear shift to make. And Stephanie, did you find that you had a kind of a similar feeling in that regard? Like, did you find that those scenes were challenging in the same way that Brandon may have found them?
Yeah, certainly. I remember the scene in the bathroom where we're brushing our teeth and then kind of step out. Noam, you allowed us so much space to kind of freely do whatever we want within the confines of the scenes. So it was really freeing, but at the same time, like, all right, where is this going to go? This like delicate, dangerous dance that our characters had. It was difficult to find that balance there between, for myself, for my character, balancing two characters internally. And then seeing which one would be, let out or slip out. So those were difficult for me as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So Jen, you've got another question.
Yeah, this one is for you, Noam. What was the starting point of the film?
The starting point of the film was, honestly, I think it was a newspaper article, and I talked about this just with a friend of mine the other day, but he was kind of asking me where the idea came from. And this is the only time this has ever happened to me, but I remember years and years ago, I took this like TV writing class, and one of the professors said, the best thing you could do to get ideas is just read like your local paper, because there's always these kind of weird stories that you'll find that aren't going to make it to, a major national newspaper. And they're just good starting points for movies. And I've never actually found a story through that workflow that I wanted to make, but somehow I came across like an online newspaper or something, and it had all of these kind of true crime stories and these weird like accounts of people's experiences that were kind of like supernatural, and it was stuff you'd never see in like a real newspaper. And anyway, I saw something about this woman who had a heart transplant. Or actually, sorry, it was a man who had a heart transplant, and he ended up, I think, marrying the woman who had his wife who, died in a car accident, her heart or something like that. So that kind of sent me on this journey. I learned about this thing called cellular memory, which is a real condition that people have and experience, where they get an organ and they start to kind of feel like they've lost part of their identity. And I just thought that would be, a fun thing to explore. So, that was kind of the launching off point. And then obviously it got iterated on quite a bit over the course of a year. I wrote this script really quick, but for roughly a year, I just kind of read books on cellular memory and on, people that have had these sort of experiences. And I thought that was, that was definitely something after the year-long research point that I was ready to kind of dive into script-wise. Someone asked earlier how long it took to shoot. It actually only took 9 days. And if you guys are interested, if you haven't seen it, on my blog at noamkroll.com, I did a whole behind-the-scenes video. You'll see a couple of blog posts about the movie on the website. And if you watch that, it'll sort of outline the 9-day process and what went into it. But yeah, let's turn things back over to our actors here. So what do you have on deck for us, Jen?
How was working on a micro budget film?
For Steph?
Yeah, well, for both of you, you can both comment on this. How does it affect your process? Is it much different? If you could just speak to that.
You want to start, Brandon?
Yeah, take it away. You go.
Okay.
Hey, let our lead take it, and then I'll chime in with any comments I make.
After working on different level budgets films, I think that there is not a lot of places to hide with micro budget as an actor. What you give, I think, shows up more on screen, and therefore I think you have to be at a higher level. You have to work harder, and there aren't a lot of time for second takes or fifth takes or all day shoots. So I think it's really important to be prepared and know exactly what you're going to do. And then also, I've said to Noam, working with a team who works really symbiotically. It was so easy and so good working on the shoot. And, you hear 9 days and you think, oh, it must have been chaotic, or it must have been, all night shooting. I mean, I had a great time shooting, and it was very easy and very relaxed. And so it was a great experience. I would say, this is probably one of my most favorite films to be on, regardless of budget.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. And Brandon, curious to hear your input on that question too.
Yeah, absolutely. To piggyback on exactly what Steph said, first and foremost, this by far was one of my absolute most favorite experiences on a film set and working on a piece. So that is full credit to Noam, to the film crew, and to you, Steph, as well. It was really just such an absolute pleasure to be on this set with everyone. I see you smiling over there, Jen. So yeah, he did a great job, and he really has something very much to be proud of here with this piece. And to piggyback on a second point that Steph made, it really all comes down to preparation. Noam and his team worked immensely hard on hammering out a production schedule that allowed them to shoot this thing in 9 days. And because of the work that they had put into it, because of the plan that they had in place, that gave, I think, at least me, and likely you as well, Steph, the opportunity to operate freely within that plan. And we knew what we were going to be working on when we showed up on the day that we got there. And that's really, really helpful, because that allows me to focus my preparation and to really hone in on what it is we're going to be doing that day. So it is a little bit tougher because, like you said, there are not all this extra time for extra takes. You can't kind of indulge in that same kind of, oh, we've got all the money in the world kind of way that you get on some other projects that have a larger budget. But in the lessening of the budget, I find oftentimes that there is an expansion of freedom within that, because you really have to bring it. You got to slam it in the first year and really go for it the first time. And that there's an abandon in that I think really is exciting to work with.
That's awesome, Brandon. Again, I really appreciate that. And, just to turn it back to you guys, the reality is, from my perspective, it may feel like we're to some degree organized, but I can tell you, to me, it never felt that way. There's always so much more, and she can attest to that. There's so much especially when, obviously I had such an amazing team, not just in front of the camera, but behind the camera as well. But just due to the nature of the project, there's only so much that I can ask of other people. So a lot of it, had to fall on myself, and I'm only so good at so many jobs. I'm not a dedicated line producer. Not, Katrina, who's in the chat now, was hugely helpful as a producer on the project, and, other people on the crew, really lifted it up. But at the end of the day, the actors, from my perspective, like the only thing that you really, have to get right, if you get anything right, is your cast, because it doesn't matter how organized you think you are or not, everything ends up falling on the backs of the cast. So to be able to perform well under the circumstances that we were in, I think is a huge testament to both of your abilities. So I have a couple of questions here from people. I'm going to see if I can, it's going to let me add these to the broadcast. So, okay, cool. So Tessa is asking, and by the way, Tessa has an awesome podcast, Femme Regard, which I was lucky to be on. So you guys should check that out as well, with Carolina, who's, I think, maybe in the chat here as well. So anyway, how did you decide which scenes to keep without music? That's a great question. At one point, the film basically had wall-to-wall music, and it really didn't work. What happened was when I edit, I never go back and watch the whole film. I usually just do one scene at a time, because otherwise I keep nitpicking. I never get anything done. So I worked on the sound, for each scene. And generally when I'm editing, I like to cover up background sounds with music, because it makes it less distracting. But what ended up happening is then when I would watch the cut front to back, everything had music, and there's no lulls in the story. It just felt like it was just one note the whole time. And that wasn't, really what this film was going to need. So I think what we ended up doing was actually taking away a lot of the cues that had been written. We removed probably 50% of the music that was composed for the movie, only left in a few cues, and then recycled them based on like story points, like where the character was maybe going through some sort of change or development. So we tried to kind of find a logic within the story, I guess you could say, for the music. And then there are basically three sort of musical themes. There's the piano music, there's the actual musical score, and then there are these drone sort of sound effects. So finding the balance between all three of those like audio elements, I think was pretty crucial to getting the soundscape right. And, hopefully the balance, came across, well. Let me bring up another question here, and then we're going to turn it to Jen, because she's got a bunch on the phone as well. So Lisa here is asking about Olive, our actress who played Olive, Gracelyn, who would I'll say, first of all, very quickly, she was awesome. We only had her for 2 days, but she basically nailed everything. You guys actually acted with her. So who wants to jump in here? Steph, Brandon?
Okay, Steph, you hit it first. I'll jump in after.
Yeah, super impressed with her professionalism, her talent, everything. She was spot on. She's going to be a star. She's really, really lovely. And it was fun to work with her. She was, lovely and very intelligent. Like nothing bad to say. She was wonderful. And I look forward to seeing her in future stuff. She was super easy to work with. And I think even the little quiet beats, she took direction super well. You can probably attest to that. Brandon?
Yeah. And she was making us laugh too. She was speaking Italian with Matteo at one point and asking him for a slice of pizza. Or, she was just kind of a little jokester. Yeah, she was a lot of fun. But yeah, Brandon, let me have you chime in on this, because you actually worked with her directly.
Yeah, absolutely. So Gracelyn was fantastic, obviously, as you said, Steph, and I completely agree that she was a little jokester, and she had a wonderful sense of humor, which goes a long way, I think, on a film set to making the process flow better. So that's a testament to her and to her team that that she's learning the kind of right way to behave on set. But beyond that, she was crucial to what I was doing as a character. And what I found really early on, from as early on as I believe it was the wardrobe fitting day, where we actually took some of the stills that were going to be ultimately used in the house. Steph, you and I worked really hard with her that day to kind of break that initial ice so that when we got to set, we could go in fully feeling comfortable with one another. And what I found, at least for myself, is that having that little bit, just that teeny little bit of base work that we had done, that groundwork, foundation work, that we did, the door and kind of sparked her curiosity. Like it kind of opened different doors for her to be excited about the notion of really investing in me being her dad and you being her mom. And so I found that little bit of foundation that we laid that day was crucial in bringing together a solid performance and an honest performance on set. And there was a couple of times on set where in the scene where where Alice gets particularly cold with Olive, or what could be perceived as cold. I don't like to judge it, but I remember something happened while we were shooting, and something more physical than what we had planned happened, and it gave all three of us this really beautiful moment that we kind of had to navigate as actors, but also as a family. And I think that was it was like Steph was like, I see you asking a question silently over there in Noam's screen.
Yeah, Jen was asking what it was. Yeah, what the moment was.
No, but it was something small. It wasn't anything like where anyone was in any type of danger or anything like that.
I think I remember, and I think it was that I'm supposed to kind of just barely shoulder her, and maybe I hit her a bit harder than was expected, or
the blocking had slightly changed, and you bumped into her, and she reacted, and it was this beautiful opportunity that just completely deepened the relationship that we had of father-daughter and daughter-mother, and coincidentally, obviously, then husband and wife. And I really think that the little bit of foundation work that we had done as a trio under Noam's guidance really helped to solidify that. So it was very satisfying to work with her in that regard, because I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of kids in the various roles that I've done. And one thing that was particularly enjoyable about Graceland was that she really kind of just gave herself over to it. Like, whereas a lot of kids are a little weirded out by it, they're kind of looking over to their mom or their on-set person all the time. Like, is this okay? This guy's acting like my dad. But she really bought into it, and there was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's take one more quickly from Jen. Well, we'll take a few more from Jen, but one for now, and then I'm going to jump back into the comments section here.
This is actually for Brandon. I like this question. Would you consider Jacob to be an antagonist to Alice in the context of the movie? And Steph, you can chime in as well afterwards.
I had a feeling someone would ask something like that. The honest answer, as honestly as I can say, is I don't know. And I don't mean for that to be a cop-out, but I was an antagonist to my wife as much as I think any partner is to any partner in real life. You know that person and you fight for that person, and unfortunately sometimes fighting for that person means you're fighting that person. Obviously what Steph's character Alice was going through was an immensely personal struggle, not only with her health but also with her recovery. And as your partner, Steph, as your husband, as Alice's husband, obviously I wanted what was best for you. And in those moments where we are clashing and where it's like, what is this guy's deal? The thing that I loved about this movie is that you wrote it, Noam, from the perspective that the audience is smart and that the audience is going to either catch up or not, and that's on them. And so there's this entire world of relationship that Steph and I got to work on completely separate from what was actually in the script. Because by the time a husband and a wife would get to the point where we're at, we've been going through this for years now with declining health, with being on a donor list. And like I said, I think sometimes in order to fight for someone, sometimes that person can be the one who's in the way and needs to be fought. So it's a tough question, and it's difficult to answer. And I don't mean it to whomever asked. I don't mean to cop out and say I don't know, but I really didn't, because I found myself questioning the same thing every day, even from as early on as rehearsal when we did that first read through. I think actually, Noam, I asked you about that as well. I was like, wow, who's who's the antagonist, who's the protagonist here, like between Michael and Jacob. Like I don't know, and that's one of the beautiful things about it, right? Is it asks those questions. So I would, sorry, Steph, go ahead.
It's done so beautifully because you kind of don't know. It's the whole time, almost until the very end, you're like, well, whose side are you on? Who, who is the person that you leaned a little more towards? And one of the most fascinating things that Noam told us that before we started filming, he said, I let a couple people read the script, and it's the exact 50-50 of they think that it's Alice's fault, that she's the one that's causing all this problem, and and then it's Jacob's fault that he's pushing her away, and it's just really interesting, I think, and that came across perfectly in the film.
That's great, and it's good that you kind of reminded me of that, because I almost forgot in the script phase how differently it read, and I think especially on the page. Once you see it stylized in the finished product with music and the way we shot it and everything, I think obviously it kind of different points the film leads you to believe, different things about each character. But when you're just reading it on the blank page, especially, and maybe at some point I'll just share, our final shooting script if anyone wants to kind of see how it translated. But it's really, I think it was really even more of like a gray area on the page. And even from my perspective, it was never supposed to be boxed in. Like I never thought Jacob is all bad or even Michael is all bad. I thought like these are complicated characters, and it's really about how Alice navigates these sort of real world situations. And obviously there's parallels between the two love interests, but yeah, it was never supposed to be black or white, because a lot of things in life are not, most things are not black and white, and I hope that sort of lended itself to this story. Yeah, Jen has a question here.
Keeping on the story note, which elements of the story changed most from the script to the final edit?
Which elements of the story changed most from the script to the final edit? I think, what really changed the most? There are two things. So this doesn't spoil anything to tell you guys you just saw it. But at some point in the film, it's revealed that that Ava, who Alice has her heart, of course, that Ava killed her own son, and you kind of see this quick shot of her pushing him down the stairs. We fought, a lot, sort of literally and like figuratively, about like whether or not that should be in the movie, and if so, when. And we tried placing it in all different areas. And the same goes for a couple of the other backstory details, because this wasn't a plot-driven film. There was plot to it, but it's very much a slow burn. As you guys know, you just watched it. It's very textural. It's more of a mood film and an atmosphere film. But that makes it all that more pressing when you do move those sort of plot points around, because the whole thing, is hinging on that. That's all you're really going off of. There's no other sort of story distractions that you're following. And I think that was a big element. But I think really what changed the most was the style. The first cut of the film, I'd say like the last 60% of the cut had a very different style than what you guys are actually looking at. And Jen, who worked with me, fairly extensively at different stages of the edit, pointed out at one point that really the first act felt really polished and kind of like it felt like the DNA of the movie was in the first act, but the second and the third act needed to almost be re-stylized to match. And I think that fundamentally really changed where the movie went and made it a different movie, and I think a better movie, because I think it made it the best it could be within the constraints of the footage that we had. Let me bring up a couple. I'm going to do some really rapid fire questions here just from the chat, because I don't want to miss any of these. So I'm scrolling. So this is where we left off, and I'll try to answer like a few of these really quick, and then we'll turn it back to the actors. So this is from Ron. Hey, would you mind talking for a minute about shooting format and the post-color process? Curious about how much the look was created on set in camera, how much enhanced in post. I'd say most of the look was in camera. So we shot in 4:3 on my Alexa Classic. I had actually bought it for my production company, but wanted to buy it in time for this movie because I wanted the film to have a very sort of vintage feel to it. And I talked with our DP, Mateo, about that as well. From the get-go, my first discussion with him, first thing I said was I want it to feel vintage. I want it to feel analog, 4:3. kind of, call back to a lot of these older school films. But he really was a master, along with Casey and Taylor and, the rest of our team, of sort of, lighting the scenes and creating the mood that you see in camera. What I did in post for color was really just enhancing what they did. So, I warmed things up, I cooled things down a little bit, but I wasn't really reinventing the wheel, other than those few shots that are like all blood red or all, royal blue, where I did a color wash. It was mainly, boosting a little saturation, kind of lifting the blacks, just doing some little touches to kind of make everything really sing. So let me jump into another one. I have not heard of Tokyo Ghoul, but I will check that out. The first and last scene to shoot. So the very first scene we shot was actually the first scene in the movie, but we reshot that later. The last scene to shoot was the scene, the dinner scene between Alice and Michael. And as I was saying kind of in the chat on Amazon, I was worried when we were shooting that because we didn't have a whole lot of time, but ended up being, Jen just said it's her favorite. So a lot of people seem to really react well to that scene, and I was definitely concerned about that one. So let's see, crew size. Yes, our crew size on most days was probably like max 8 to 10 people, I think. Does that sound right to you guys? 8 or 10 people?
Yeah.
Roughly? Okay.
Definitely fewer than a dozen, yeah.
Basically, myself, Katrina, I had a friend of mine who was in town who basically helped us, kind of a AD/assistant. And then we had location sound, our small camera team of 3 people. And some days we'd have, a tutor. When the Graceland was on set, we had, who else would have been there? Haley Bringle was doing makeup, John Stanley, production design. That was basically it. So really, really tight crew. Let's see what else. What was the decision to shoot 4:3 for this film? Mainly just about creating a more sort of claustrophobic atmosphere, but also paying homage to some of these, old school films like Ingmar Bergman films that I really loved, that were kind of influential on me stylistically and would have been shot in that format because, they're going back so many decades. Last question. Well, I'm going to take a bunch more in a second, but last one for now from the chat, and then I'll turn it back to Jen's questions. This is from Andrew. Andrew asks, can you go a little more into pre-production process that resulted in you shooting a feature in 9 days? How did the crew work together? How did you plan, etc.? Well, I would say the biggest things that helped us, and by the way, if any of you guys have questions on this later and I can't fully address stuff, just email me, info@gnomecrawl.com, and I'll share whatever I can that way too. But basically, we tried to prep whatever possible before. We didn't have a lot of days to pre-light or to do rehearsals or any of that, but the little time that we did had, we tried to use. So we did, at least 1 or 2 days of pre-lighting before location 1. 1 day of pre-lighting and sort of set deck for location 2 beforehand. That was really, really crucial because, as anyone knows from being on a feature film set, the more you are, the more days you're on set with everybody, the quicker everybody works together, the more synergy there is. So having even 1 day or 2 days to work together beforehand was really, instrumental, I think. We also did a rehearsal, and I think, Steph, you may have mentioned this before, but I'll turn it back to you as well if there's anything else you want to add on the rehearsal front, because, and maybe, I can kind of ask you this, because we had to dual purpose our rehearsal as also a camera test and as also shooting behind the scenes photos with you guys and doing a wardrobe call. We did all that on 1 day. Which I think really helped us. How was that from your perspective? Did you still feel like you kind of got what you needed, I guess, from the day?
Yeah, absolutely. Super functional day, if we're talking like production wise, but also creatively. I know that we did so much, just rehearsal in an afternoon, and there was so much discovery there. And especially I remember you videotaped a rehearsal, which I haven't done many times before. And then I know that you changed lines in the movie to what we organically said, and that felt really great. Some of my favorite lines that you ended up writing in were things that we had said to each other in that rehearsal. So that was, super helpful. And like, just, it felt like you cared about the work that we were doing on our characters, not just telling us, here's your script, read the lines. it felt like we were part of the creative team and process.
For sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Katrina here, and like shot lists and schedule for a couple days. I remember
That's
that
right.
was very helpful.
Yeah, that's right. So again, Katrina, another, hats off to you for coming here. That process is such a blur that I almost, there's so many little steps along the way. Jen just reminded me of, I guess, that 2-day period or whatever it would have been when Katrina came over. We're probably, sitting right here on this couch, and we just went through basically to schedule the movie. I think was that what it was? We were kind of doing the shot, not the shot list, but the shooting schedule. So we're going through scene by scene and just trying to figure out how do we fit all of this in to this really small window of time. And on top of it, we wanted to shoot as sequentially as possible, which was a huge challenge. We obviously couldn't shoot everything in sequence because we're in 2 different locations, but we were trying within the locations to be as sequential as possible. And yeah, I remember Katrina and I sitting here for a while, and then probably going back and forth, I'm sure, over many emails to try to dial that in. And it was still evolving as it went even into production, because it's just the nature of how these projects kind of unfold. But actually, I'm going to bring up one more quick one, and then we'll throw it back to another Jen question. Noam, why did you cut to black in between every scene? So it's funny that actually started as an accident. It was, so the way that I like to edit my movie, some people edit their films in individual sequences in their timeline. I like to have just one big timeline of the whole movie. And just so I could see it globally, I could zoom back and look at all the scenes, what they look like in order. And, not knowing how I was going to transition from one scene to the next, was I going to use B-roll or shoot some, establishing shots and integrate them? I didn't really know what the transitions were going to be between certain scenes because we just shot the bare bones. So I put these little black frames underneath. And then I watched it enough times where it just felt like it kind of worked better with the black frames, and I started adding in other shots that we took, or B-roll or stock footage, just to test the ideas, and none of it felt as right. And I think, I didn't plan this from the get-go, but I think to me, just that blackness is sort of, there are these moments where Alice is sort of like losing her identity, and in a sense that was just a sort of visual representation of her little like lapses in consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if it worked or not for everyone, but for me, it kind of felt organic to the film. So that's why I kept it in. Want to go to another Jen question? Anything for our actors here?
Yeah. Were any of the scenes improvised, or was everything scripted?
Yes. So were any of the scenes improvised? I know some of them were. Who wants to jump in on this? Actually, I'll let me get Brandon to chime in, and then I'll have you follow up on this, Steph. But I want to talk about that. What is like the second last scene in the movie? So Brandon, the one, and that was kind of a different. It felt different when we were shooting that than some of the other scenes, and I remember there being improv there. Can you speak to that moment a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I get to answer this question directly. Yes, several of the pieces of the film were improvised. In addition to Noam being really generous with the script and allowing us to come at a number of the lines organically and kind of find them ourselves, he was also incredibly generous as a director in trusting us as the performers and kind of really listening to what our instincts about the scene were saying, and then shooting it in a way that worked to enhance those instincts. And chief among them, I think, at least for my character, was that kind of crucial scene that I already spoke briefly about towards the end of the film, in which Jacob, in which I'm really, really concerned about Alice. She has been gone now for, I think, what was it, 2 days or something like that. She's been gone for 2 days or a day. I can't remember.
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
Yeah, she's disappeared. And so I, privately, before we got into that scene, and I had to kind of do this delicately because there was a lot of things going on that day that we shot that, and we shot that very, very late in the day. But I had an idea for that scene that I really wanted to ask Noam if he was comfortable with me coming into the space on my own cue, rather than lights, camera, action, traditional, okay, actor, come here, stand here, say this. I had a fairly intense preparation planned for that scene, and Noam trusted me to run with it. And so I had talked to Noam and I talked to Steph, kind of told them a little bit about what I wanted to do, and essentially we improvised, I would say 90% of the physical blocking of that scene, as well as a handy portion of the dialogue, at least at the top of that scene. The phone call that I'm on was completely improvised. The note is completely improvised, and Steph came in on her own cue, and which is something that I asked for her to do. And actually, in the shooting of that scene, I remember very, very specifically, there was a moment where a car came past the window of the location, particularly loud. And I got really excited thinking that was Alice. So I ran to the window and I checked. And I remember after that happened, the sound guy actually came over and said, "Thank you so much for acknowledging that car sound." I was like, "Well, of course, man. It's like I'm thinking my wife's coming home, so maybe that's her." There were other smaller moments throughout the script as well that Noam let us play with and let us improvise as actors. That was the big kind of improvisation moment for me. And that was crucially important because that was the climax of my pro/antagonist character. Because I really got to bring my truth to that moment, and Noam stood back to capture it in the way that he felt was appropriate, which was really, really special. And I can say that you don't typically get that. So that was very, very special. And I think it worked, not just to like sit here and oh yeah, he did a good job, like not to sit here and say how fantastic that was. I think it really worked for the intensity of that moment as well. And a husband and a wife finding a way to come back together. And I think it was a good call all around for Noam to trust us enough to let us do it. And for both Steph and I to be at that level of trust as performers with one another to say, hey, let's throw this up in the air and see where it lands.
Yeah, and Steph, I want to turn it over to you two in a sec. Just to add to what Brandon said, I think in the moment, from my perspective at least, it's hard to employ those sort of tactics on every scene, although, I would love to. But when we get a chance to do it, as we did in that case where you guys could really be, on your toes, you could be improvising and coming up with new ideas. To me, like, that's the whole fun of being on a set. And, I think that if you go into a set, obviously you have to be prepared, but if you go in thinking that exactly every single shot, every angle, you start doing line readings with the actors and micromanaging performances, I don't think that is, at least for me, what yields great results. And I think it's letting you guys have your freedom and letting you kind of work within your comfort zone. That is not only like what yields usually better results, but it's just more fun. I remember like the crew, and I think Taylor came up to me, who was our gaffer, and he literally came up to me. He probably came up to you too, Brand. I see you smiling, but he said, I think he literally said, like, that's the best acting in person I've ever seen in my life, because what people don't understand if they're just watching the finished scene is we did it probably like, I don't know, 10 times, and there were some takes where the takes went on for like 15 minutes and you guys were just riffing on it, and it got really intense and we cut it way down. But it was fun. Anyway, I'll turn it over to Steph if there's anything else you want to add to the conversation too.
Yeah, absolutely. On set, it's easy to, like you said, it was the end of a long day for us. We shot kind of chronologically per location. So all the stuff that we shot with Brandon and myself at the one house, we shot all the way through, and then moved over to the second location with Michael character. So that was kind of like the culmination of our story. And it's long days, you're tired, maybe you're a little hungry, and like it's easy to get mechanical about what you do, and you've rehearsed it and you've been up late studying the script, and so you think you know it. So to have someone else giving you unscripted things, it keeps you living like instantaneously in that character, especially the scenes where you and Olive were talking, Brandon, to hear you guys just little things, like it made my mind stay in the Alice mode. So it was really like entertaining to just be on set and like while the camera's rolling, be like, oh, okay, I can, be a real person here. I don't just have to fake it. So that was great. And I also remember that there was a lot in that final scene there with us, like tears and crying and emotion, and a lot of that was edited out, but I feel like the energy was so there. Like all that energy that we worked to build up, especially with you, Brandon, came through beautifully. And also there was, a couple scenes with Johnny as well in the other house that were maybe more playful, that I remember like almost blushing over or being, taken aback, in the complete opposite way, that it was improv, that kept, those scenes fresh as well. So I love it too. And, respecting us as actors to do our job just made it fly so well.
That's great. I don't know why I just remembered this, but somebody emailed me saying they were talking about that dinner scene with Johnny, and they said they really liked the scene, but I guess they were saying like the only emotion they had was they just wanted to punch him in the face the whole scene. And I feel like that's kind of what his character evoked. And even the Jacob character, to an extent, I think they just grate on people and in a great way. By the way, we're going to see if we can bring in our DP, Matteo, and a second here. He's texting me from Italy saying he's going to be ready in a minute. We'll see if our technical configuration allows for that. Jen's got a question. One sec.
How did this process differ from other productions that you've directed?
So this process was actually pretty different from any project I've directed. I've done a lot of really, like on the narrative end, really micro budget scrappy films like this, but they've typically been done in a more loose way. This we only had 9 days, and it was almost scheduled more like a traditional film production, where on other shoots I might just go myself with a camera, or I might go with a 2 or 3 person team and just kind of, wing it as we go. And this was a lot more planned, a lot more purposeful. So I think that was probably the biggest change, and also just trying something more like genres, trying something more stylized. I'm a big fan of like naturalism in films and realism, but I'm also a huge fan of, stylistic genre pieces and everything in between. So this was kind of, an attempt to fuse together a lot of these different ideas, both in terms of the actual story and the narrative, but also even the way that we configured our production. So, okay, let me pull up 1 or 2 more of these while we wait on Matteo. So let's see. Here's a question. All right. So, Noam, how do you manage to direct your vision of the story while allowing your crew and cast the space to breathe and be creative? So hopefully we kind of covered a little bit about this in the last question in terms of improv and things like that. But I think the bottom line is, from my perspective, there are some things that I really care about that matter to me legitimately. And there are other things that, I'm not going to sort of fight for, or I'm not going to fight against what everyone around me might want to do or might be sharing, as far as their ideas, because ultimately it is a collaborative process. So I think as a director, my interpretation of a director is not just the person that tells everybody literally what to do and micromanages, but it's the person that sort of knows the backbone of the movie, the DNA of the movie, what connects everything together, and then is the filter. So when everybody has ideas, they take all the best ideas from everybody that really apply to this story, and then they filter it into one movie. And the other great ideas that maybe don't fit into the story, then, those may end up on the cutting room floor. And many of those ideas are my own too. So it's just a collaborative process, I think, all the way through. And I think, for me, just to be more practical, I think prepping with the cast, prepping with the crew, giving people, some insight into what I'm hoping to achieve, having some really like detailed discussions with everybody and prep days and all of that before, it really helps, because then when you get to set, you don't have to feel like you're micromanaging everybody, because you've already had the discussions. It's just about whether or not we're executing the thing that hopefully everybody's already on the same page for. So hopefully that kind of answers that question. Here's a good question. Someone else, Nolan, asked what camera, if you missed this, Nolan, it was my Alexa Classic 4x3. which, by the way, if anyone ever wants to buy a used Alexa, they're pretty affordable these days, and they're as good as ever in terms of quality. So one more here I'm going to bring up. Here we go, from Dennis. So why was the husband's death so easy without much of a fight from him? It's a great question, because we talked about, I think, different versions of that, and I know I went over that a lot in my own mind. And I think the original intent was that this shouldn't be a big violent murder, because he's not, the whole thing with Johnny's character, with Michael, was it was more subtle and it was more psychological. He wasn't this like physically imposing character that she had to battle or anything like that. So I felt that to create any sort of, physical altercation between the two of them probably would have felt not aligned with some of the other choices in the story. At the same time, the obvious idea would just be for her to take that gun that he used to kill Ava and just to, shoot Michael with the gun. And you kind of think maybe she's going to do that at one point. But ultimately, that just felt too easy. And it felt like it would be a more intimate moment to almost have, while he's sleeping, have Alice like lie next to him in the bed, put the bag over his head. So by the time he realizes he's being suffocated, he's presumably, in our eyes, he's already passing out. It was more subtle, it was more calculated, more smooth, and more about her intent than the actual like physicality of it. So I think that was the idea, and we tried a few different variations, and obviously the version in the edit is the one that lasted. So let me see one more question here, and then great idea to have this chat. Thank you. Were there a lot of seeing the other shots that you didn't include in the final film? Oh, yes. So I think what you're referring to are the shots of Ava. I think there were at least, what do you think? There were a couple, right?
We got rid of a good few.
A few. Yeah, I remember there were a couple reveals, more reveals, where we saw Ava like standing in the background. And there was at least one or two that we cut because at a certain point it felt too much. Yeah, exactly. It didn't really add anything, and it almost felt stronger with fewer of them. And we tried other ideas. I don't know, Steph, do you remember? Well, I'm sure you remember, but you came over here and we recorded all these lines of dialogue. Remember, like all these different voiceover lines?
Yeah. Yes, yeah. There was a lot actually that you wanted to maybe throw in on top of an inner monologue, or just like whispers or thoughts that were going through Alice's head, as these things were happening. And I love the way it turned out without it. And I think the sound engineering, the music became such a key role in the film that it's lovely the way it is. But yeah, we did do a couple of scenes with Jess, who, ironically, I don't know if you mentioned this in another place, but she actually has a missing tooth that we were like, oh my God, what? Oh my God, she's perfect.
All right, Matteo's here, guys, all the way from Italy.
Hey.
Good morning. Thanks for getting. What time is it there?
5:51.
Oh my God.
Thanks for coming.
All right. Well, I know we had some questions. So Matteo, just to get you up to speed, we are taking some questions from people on the chat, and then Jen has a bunch of questions that people wrote in with and that we kind of had on a list. So I know there are a few, at least for Matteo. So maybe let's jump to one of those before we move on. Are you awake enough for a question, Matteo, or you need a? Okay. All right.
Okay, ready?
Yes.
What were some of the challenges of working in a 4:3 aspect ratio?
I think it was just initially, right? You remember, it's like at the beginning, it was like, that's weird. But I think once we got used to it, it was pretty smooth. You just have to reframe stuff from, you don't have like those sides, but you just have it here, and it was kind of nice actually, because especially if you're doing like people, I don't know, it's kind of natural, so you just need to get used to it. But I think it was a. I remember I told you, right? Because everybody was like anamorphic stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, let's do 4x3. Okay, cool.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if you feel this way, but a lot of people asked me that too. Like, was it harder to shoot in 4x3 because it's a weird format? But in a way, I almost like, from my perspective, found it easier because we're seeing less of the frame. So, like, the wider you go, the more the background you see, and then that means like every bit of um, gear needs to be cleared from the background, or every little prop that you have has to be perfect. So the more square your aspect ratio, it's almost like the less you kind of have to deal with in the frame, especially in our case because we shot everything, or a lot of it, really tight. So I think
Yeah.
Mateo. Oh, there you are.
No,
So
yeah, no, you're right. It's again, you have to get used to it, but I feel that the most challenging thing was that having the two people there, because it's uh, but yeah, after that, man, I kind of like it, and I kind of miss it now. So
yeah, totally. I know it's I wish I could shoot everything on 4x3, and in the end, even all the TV shots that we had in the movie, all like the screen replacements, I just did like 4x3 just to keep it consistent.
Like the soft and hazy look on the camera. How did you achieve that?
Yeah, people are asking about like the haze and the softness. Like, a lot of people want to know basically how you lit the scenes to get them to look, the way that they did, and kind of look like Brandon's camera. I'm just gonna flick over, but this nice sort of glimmer glass or pro mist or whatever
yeah,
it was. Can you talk to that a little bit, Mateo?
yeah, we used a lot of haze, huh? We did use a lot of haze, and I feel yeah, we had the glimmer glass.
Glimmer glass,
I
yeah.
woke up earlier. Um, I think you remember the glimmer glass, quarter glimmer glass, and then a lot of haze. So I think that was the kind of like a trick. And then of course the Alexa Classic 2K ProRes. I think it was the main part too, because people now shoot like I shoot like 6K, like super sharp. So just the fact to shoot 2K, I think it was like part of the look, because like it's crazy to say, but you do the look in with the codec as well.
For sure.
For sure. ProRes 2K, and then A's for sure, the glimmer glass, and the lenses too, because there's like optimal, so the vintage lenses. So I think it was a combination of everything, but
Yeah, we kind of did everything to soften it, like at the same time, and that's what it needed because it had to feel vintage. And even on the Alexa Classic, it's still a really sharp, when it's well lit, as it was with you. Obviously, it still needed something to kind of soften it, and I think you achieved that really really well. Brandon, we have a nice comment here for
yeah.
you. Brandon Allen
And the
Smith.
ISO too, I think ISO we're shooting pretty high, right? Like 1600
Yeah.
inside.
Sorry,
But,
because you guys, those of you, meaning Steph, Mateo, and Brandon, cannot see the comments on the screen. But I just brought up someone said Brandon Allen Smith is an incredible actor. So a lot of people have been singing your praises, and I've had so many. For both of you guys, Steph and Brandon and Johnny as well. I've had like I can't tell you how many like nice emails where like the first thing they say, other than maybe complimenting Mateo's cinematography, is, talking to just saying like those performances. And I think people know on a movie like this, like if it's not, if those two elements aren't there, if you don't have a movie that looks like a movie, and if you don't have actors that can carry a movie at that length, then you don't really have anything. So anyway, just a nice testament. Here's another
really
question. Sorry to keep jumping. There's so many coming in, so I want to make sure we get to all these. I'm gonna pull you up, Mateo, because this one's for you. So this question: how did you get the high angle aerial shot outside with Alice and the other guy, meaning I guess Michael, drinking wine on the patio? Do you remember that, Mateo?
yes, I do. Yeah, we're on that little balcony, huh? And yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because we were on a balcony coming off of, I think it was like the second floor, like restroom that we shot in at one point. There was this weird like balcony off the side. and then we just shot looking down. And it's, you know, I was kicking myself after the fact that we didn't actually shoot the whole scene from that angle. Because I probably would have just used that in the edit because I liked the shot so much. But I think when Casey was zooming in, and he, you know, it wasn't fully manual, but he basically had to have his finger on the trigger in such a precise way, otherwise the zoom would get screwed up. And even at the slowest zoom, it took like, the scene was too long. So
issue for you guys. You guys struggled with that almost every day. You guys wrestled that. By the time, at least, you know, by the time my portion of it was finished, he had gotten really, really good at it. Where is he? We need to zoom.
Forearm. He was using from his like pinky finger to his upper arm to like zoom.
It was crazy. And then I guess a follow up to that also from Adam was which lenses did you use? So you remember Matteo, but I guess we were on the Optimos, or is that what
Optimus.
Optimos. Yeah.
16 to 35, 2.8, and 30 to 80, 2.8. That was it, right?
That was the first time I ever shot zooms on a feature either. I'm normally very much a prime sort of guy, but we wanted to zoom in camera, and also we had so little time, so that really helped speed us up. Thank you.
I've got a question for you guys.
Oh yes, please.
One of my personal favorite shots is the one where I'm on the phone with the doctor, Dr. Cole, and the scene is just ever so slightly tilting. Was that planned on your end, Noam, or do you guys decide that on the day?
Noam, that was Noam. It took me like a while to realize what he wanted to do, because I remember it was like, this is the tripod. We're gonna put the camera not like this, but like this, and then we're gonna tilt.
That was you know.
Happen?
It's funny because a friend of mine did another funny like shot like that in his movie. It wasn't exactly the same, but he mounted the camera the wrong way on the tripod plate. So basically on a 90-degree angle. And then that allowed him to pan the camera in a way that kind of made it like twist instead of just pan up and down. And then, in that scene, I mean, I was just always trying to think of a way, like every scene, we're in the same locations, we're with the same characters, like, you know, we have to figure out how to make this look a little bit different each time. So in that scene, it was going to be a oneer for the most part. I think we shot like a bit of coverage, but we didn't use it. And then it just made sense to do that slow tilt because, I don't know, I think you almost don't notice it when you're watching it until the end of that scene. And then you're like, oh, we're on this like extreme Dutch angle kind of all of a sudden, which was kind of cool. Let me see. Oh, we've got certain exposures. Oh, and by the way, where was it? So someone here, oh yes, love the switch from gun to plastic bag. Thank you. I'm glad that worked. That was something we didn't know if we were going to use or not. So I appreciate that. So what a world. I've been watching Matteo's channel for a while. Matteo, of course, if you guys don't follow him yet, has an amazing YouTube channel as well. He did not use the Leica R lenses. No, the classic is... So the classic is PL, and I converted my classic. I have also an EF mount now. I can swap them. But yeah, we shot PL, obviously, I guess, right, Matteo?
Yeah, we shot PL. Yeah, even going back, I mean, the Leica, I kind of like the look, but yeah, still we needed the zoom. So, you know, you don't have a lot of option when you want to go vintage and zooms. So, I mean, the Optimus is just... pretty much like you know, the only choice one of the few choices that you can do, because I think it's like not too vintage too. They're like vintage, but in a way you can use them for other stuff, I guess. So they're pretty, in a way.
They're not so I mean, there's a bit of a vignette, but it's not so extreme that it's like distracting. Here's a good question that maybe I'll answer and then I'll throw to the actors as well. So were there any specific films you watched in preparation, either cinematography inspirations or for reference while directing, or for the actors to build on the characters? So yeah, that's a great question. I think, and maybe you guys will remember if I sent you references. I almost can't remember what they were now. I know that what I was watching, I did send them, right? Yeah, I would have sent some films. I think probably what I sent there were a couple of films I was watching that I really loved this style of. One, they're both foreign films. One is called Thelma, which came out, I think, in like 2018. And it's also sort of in a similar genre, and it's very kind of, to me, more of a slow burn, but like really interesting, and it just kind of sizzles the whole time. And then there's this other film called Raw, which is about this younger sort of young woman who goes to college and then discovers that she's becoming a cannibal. And I loved how that just showed this like person going through this insane transformation. So I think those, coupled with some of the stories that I talked about before that inspired the narrative, those were really helpful for me. And it's funny because a lot of people now, I'm a huge Hitchcock fan, but a lot of people now say like, oh, this must have been super influenced by Hitchcock or by David Lynch or all these people who I love. And I'm, honored that people even think that, but those weren't really specifically influences for this movie. How about you guys? I'll turn it to Steph. Anything you remember from those early days of, talking about movies, or anything that maybe you've watched in preparation that kind of, made you feel you were totally up to speed for this character?
As you were talking, I was trying to recount, but you sent us a pretty extensive list of things that were references for you and characters. And I know that we did a lot of research on that. And for the life of me, I can't remember one. Raw was a very intense movie. I remember watching that one.
Yeah.
I can't quite remember, except for gathering like a general tone, which is super helpful, because I think tone is something that can be really, if it's not agreed upon, creatively agreed upon, you could be working with people who think they're doing a completely different movie. So I think just getting that together really helped to get us all on the same page.
Absolutely. And Brandon, I can't remember if I sent this to you guys, but I maybe even sent like a Cassavetes film as a reference.
Yeah, I actually was able, while Steph was answering, I was able to pull up the list that you sent. I don't know if you want to give away your dirty secrets here,
no,
but
please. Yeah, whatever is in there. I have a
list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 films actually that you recommended to all of us after our first initial cast rehearsal.
Okay,
and they include Thelma, as you referenced earlier, but then a couple other ones that you didn't quite reference yet. Persona by Ingmar Bergman.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Killing of a Sacred Deer, Martha Marcy May Marlene, which is a heck of a title to try to get out on a YouTube video. So thanks for that. And A Woman Under the Influence, which is the Cassavetes film.
Yeah.
I think Steph's dead on the money there. These are most helpful, at least for Steph, as she just said, and at least for myself as well, in terms of beginning to identify tone and what it is, because part of what we have to do as performers is understand or try to get to a place where we understand what you're looking for as the director. This is your film. This is your vision. How can we best fit into that and use our skills to fit into that? So these films that you recommended are super helpful in us kind of putting together, what do they call it? A style board, or what's that called?
Board, yeah.
It's like a little Pinterest snapshot into your brain of what you think this project ultimately will kind of look or feel or sound like.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think the reason I sent you the Cassavetes thing, and maybe this is helpful for anyone who sends references, which I think is so important. But if I'd only sent the other 4 films, I think they're, Persona obviously is an older film. So that's going to feel a little bit different, but especially those first 3, Killing the Sacred Deer and Raw and Thelma, they're all very, to me, stylized in a very, very similar way. And the one thing that none of those films had that I was at least trying to attempt with this film was those moments between you guys as actors, Steph and Brandon, just those discussions and arguments and those family moments. And the Cassavetes reference couldn't be further from what this movie is. But to me, that movie, A Woman Under the Influence, that's some of my favorite acting I think I've ever seen, period, on film. And obviously the movie was shot in a super DIY way, even for its day, because Cassavetes was, so ahead of his time in that way. So I felt like, with all the references that we had going in one direction, I was hoping that one would kind of throw us a curveball and really like take it in a different direction. Mateo, someone's asking about your YouTube channel, and then I'm going to come back to you because I think you're going to say something, Brandon. Your YouTube channel, what's the name? Matteo Bertoli?
Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Just my name and last name.
So subscribe to Matteo on YouTube, Matteo Bertoli. And Brandon, I think I saw you were going to chime in here. I may have cut you off, and then we'll take me. You're good? Okay. So
no. I would love to. I'd love to jump in.
Okay. Yeah. You've got the floor.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is, I think that it's a really special treat when, as an actor, a director is like, "Hey, here's some stuff that I think you might like with regard to our film." And this was back when the film had a different working title as well. So this went way back to the early process.
White Crow.
I think that it's super important for an actor, for a performer, to recognize the gifts that are being given, and when you get an opportunity to peek inside of the director's head like that and really see where he's drawing the source material or the influences from a piece, it's super important to use. And if I can, I just want to read directly your words, Noam, from the email that you wrote with regard to what you actually just said about a woman under the influence.
Sure. Don't get me in
so
trouble,
this was the note. No.
Just kidding.
I read it to make sure you weren't saying anything weird.
The email goes, fuck yeah, that's awesome, just go wild.
I'm curious what I said now, but go ahead.
Just for everyone else viewing, this was a very early correspondence that Noam sent to us, Stephanie and Johnny and myself, with regard to a few pieces of reference for inspiration videos, and one of them, again, being A Woman Under Fire, 1974 by director John Cassavetes. Of all the films listed here, this is by far the furthest away from, quote, White Crow. That was the original working title. In terms of style, unlike the others that are more moody, dark, pensive, this is simply a drama about a husband and wife dealing with mental illness, with mental health issues. I hesitate to even list it here as I don't want to throw anyone off course too much, but there are one or two Jacob Alice scenes that may draw inspiration from the relationship between the two leads. Great watch, even just for fun. And the reason I think it's important to mention that is first, it shows, I think, everyone listening kind of how far back considerations for things like that go, for relationships between characters, and for your recognition as a director as to kind of where you want the story to go. I think oftentimes so many people don't understand how much thought can go into something like this, and in my opinion, how much thought should go into something like this. And to go back then to another question that dealt with Steph and I personally on the day, this was actually, of all the films that you recommended that we check out, was the one that resonated most with me, because at its core, that's what I was essentially dealing with Alice throughout the course of the film, be it her mental state or her physical health state. That was the drive, and that was kind of why I was unable to answer that earlier question about is Jacob the antagonist to Alice throughout the piece. And it's, again, that speaks directly to your consideration of that as early in the process as that was.
That's awesome. I really appreciate that, and it's just so great to know that resonated with you, because I thought, again, I remember hesitating to send it because it's like, I don't want to throw you guys way off and you're like, what the hell, what's this movie that we're making now? But I do think, trying to find, trying to blend those things together, to me is a huge challenge, but can make for a great film when you have those real emotional moments that none of the other films I referenced had, in the same way, except for the Cassavetes film. So I really appreciate that you shared that. I want to ask you guys, just as we get closer to winding this down, can each of you, there's a mix of people here, watching us live, and then I'm going to have this live on YouTube. I'm going to share it probably on my podcast at some point. So there's going to be a lot of different people, but I know for a fact, just based on the responses, we have filmmakers here, we have actors, we have other DPs. So I'd love, as we conclude this, if maybe each of us could sort of go through and give like our one piece of advice for the person who's 10 years younger or our age but just getting started or whatever it may be, who wants to sort of pursue a similar path. So maybe Steph, I could start with you, and I think I had you on my podcast. I didn't publish it yet, and I think we talked about this a little bit in a different context, but if you're okay, I'll put you on the spot first and see if any of the actors watching this, and I know we've got a handful, if you have some advice for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we spoke about staying passionate and working on your craft, or taking little baby steps every single day, and whether that's writing or studying or getting we're doing body work with yourself as an actor, just doing a little bit of something every day, and being specific with what you want and your goals. And I think also finding that that crew of people that you can connect with. And if you don't have that, or you don't have the resources to find those people, do it yourself. You become the hub of your creative world. And I think that's kind of the game has changed so much in the past 10 or 5 years, because we have camera phones, we have tripods, we have, you can buy lights on, online for $20. And so it's so accessible to start making your own movies and stories and content. Even if it's just at the beginning here, like that's the first step towards becoming a filmmaker and a creative person. So I'm constantly inspired by my peers and the people around me, and getting to work with people like you guys. I felt so lucky. Every single person as part of the crew was at the top of their game. So it feels good. It helps raise you up when and trust and believe in everyone else around you.
That's awesome. I again really appreciate that, and I'm sure a lot of people listening, other actors, can really sort of learn from that. And I think one of the things that I've always admired about your path, and again, we probably talked about this on the podcast too, but just the fact that you've had obviously success just getting out there and getting cast in movies because you have a great deal of talent. So that's going to get you there. But at the same time, that doesn't stop you from producing your own content or from diving into a small movie like this when, you're coming off of other bigger sets. So I think just your willingness to explore all the different angles is something that probably, a lot of actors could learn from and benefit from, because I know from my stint as an actor in high school, the most frustrating thing was always just waiting for the phone to ring and feeling like you didn't have control over your destiny. And you're able to sort of get into all these amazing projects through so many different avenues. So I think that's definitely something everyone can take from. In a second, Mateo, I'll get to you with a similar question. But first, while we're on the actors, Brandon, any final words of wisdom for our actors or our filmmakers who are in the audience here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's crucially important, as Steph said, to continue fueling that passion. And beyond that, I think it's also just very, very important, and it's one of the things with which I struggle personally, just on a day-to-day basis or even on a project-to-project basis, but is maintaining a sense of trust. And that speaks to not only just interpersonal trust in terms of trusting the actor with whom I'm working, trusting the director with whom I'm working under or working for, but also just trusting just generally myself as well. And knowing that if you have an instinct, it's for a reason. If you have a strong feeling about something, it's for a reason. And those are the times that it's really worth bringing in your collaborators and really worth speaking to the other people that with whom you're performing or working. I know that even times on this project, I spoke personally with Mateo about what we were doing in a shot. How is this going to be lit? Okay, that sounds great. And it's that type of trust and openness that you can bring to your own personal performance, your own personal work as a creative artist, whether you're an actor or a director or cinematographer or whomever. We're all creatives in that world together. And I think the more that you can trust not only the people that you're working around, but also yourself, the better the healthier of a place you will be. And that's something, in addition to continuing to fuel the passion, that I think is really important, is coming at it from a very healthy, excited place.
There's one more thing.
Trusting. Sorry. What? Sorry. What?
Yeah, there's one more thing I want to add after sharing what you're saying about like trusting the people around you, is that like look for the people in your life, in your circle, who are expanders, who are gonna who you admire or look up to. And also, I in the producing that I've done, I have been so surprised at how willing people are to help. The people who are, a little bit above your level, or, the person that you're afraid to kind of reach out to because they might not email you back. Don't be afraid to, get a no, because so many times that I've, reached out or, sent those messages and gotten a positive response back with help. So I think, always look for the people who are, going to help you step up one more level.
That's great. And I think even right now, I keep telling people this, just friends of mine and whatever, but, I find during this time that we're in, everybody's lives are so like shaken up. And for anyone that is looking to like reach out to a producer, a financier, an actor, whatever it may be, I feel like, it never feels like the right time, but like this is kind of the time to do that. And, because people are at home, people are receptive, and everyone's schedules and lives are changing, and everything's kind of in flux. And I think, like, to again reiterate what you said, Steph, I think it's just the idea that can really sort of I don't know, you could take your own destiny into your hands in a sense. I'm getting all these texts, so I think we're okay. I was trying to see if anyone else is trying to join the chat. Jen, any last words from you? Okay. I have some, but let me ask Mateo first. So, Mateo, and I'm sorry that we didn't get to pick your brain more, but perhaps we'll do another podcast follow-up soon. I'm going to bring up on the screen, Miggy Vision has said Mateo, so you've got a lot of exclamation marks here from Mickey Vision. So yeah, Mateo, there's obviously DPs listening to this and watching this, and you've had a really successful, but also like me, unconventional career, because you have your YouTube channel and you freelance, and you work on film. So, I want to hear, I guess, from your point of view, what you recommend, and, what other DPs can be doing to follow in your footsteps.
Yeah, I think I kind of wanted to echo what Stephanie and Brandon were saying, that, for DP, but I think for, every role is not just about you. It's, like my answer before, they were kind of short, because I didn't do crazy stuff, it's like they were simple stuff, but when you have like all those, it's like a puzzle, right? When you have like the actors, the production design, the director, the location, like everything combined, that I think, Roger Dick is a genius, but it's not, it's all about what you have in front of your camera. It's all about that. So yeah, if you can find a way, because for me it was like the biggest struggle growing up in a small town in Italy. Like nobody here is a filmmaker. In LA it's easier because everybody's a filmmaker. But yeah, it was hard to find someone that wanted to camera assist or to do gaffer. Yeah, there's a couple of videographers here that I know, but I think that the main thing is find like people that you can collaborate and create stuff together, because I think that's the best way. And for me, the biggest struggle was that I didn't have anyone growing up that I could share what I was doing. But when you have like the right actor in front of you, like Brandon, Stephanie, everybody in the movie was like kind of insane. Everything fell in place together, and it was kind of like, again, I always say, like the best thing ever shot. But it's not because I shot it, it's because like everything was there, the story, the actors, the location, the production design, everything was so I think it's just about the team. So if you can,
I appreciate that. Yeah. And that's sorry to cut you off. That's a great point though. And I think, I feel that way from the directing standpoint too, that the most important thing is like everyone else, because if you have a great DP, you have great actors, you have a great set, then like, you know, it's really all you have to do is just like not screw it up, basically. You know, it's you know, that's
you need a
kind.
good story. You still need a good
You need
story,
a good
but
story, yeah. But assuming, you know, you've done all the work, especially on set, especially in production, it's like assuming you've done the work, assuming
yeah.
you've, you know, kind of prepped and everything, then like, you know, I used to think a director's job was being on set and like figuring it out then and there. And like you learn quickly that that's how to, you know, fall on your face pretty badly. You know, and the one thing that I'll add to this discussion, and, you know, I wrote a whole article, I published it on my newsletter maybe like a week or two ago. But the point was that, you know, you have to complete your projects. And that's something that took me a long time to learn. You know, when you're first starting as a creative person, you want to, you know, just like make stuff as quickly as you can. And that's great because that's how you learn initially. But that learning curve only takes you so far. When you don't finish a project, you don't release a project, nothing that you work on is ever going to be 100% what you want it to be. I think it was, you know, David Fincher, I guess, that said, like, if your movie's 70% of what you had in your mind, then it was a success. But the truth is, you know, that most films, it's 50% or 40%. But even if it's 70%, you don't feel that confident in necessarily finishing your movie sometimes because you're like, I know what the 100% version looked like in my mind. But if you don't finish it, if you don't release it, if you don't kind of set it free, then you can't move on to the next project. And, you know, the reason I wrote that article was because I had this, you know, I wasn't specifically trying to write a project, but I always jot down ideas for movies and scenes and stuff like that. And I didn't find that I was able to, like, you know, come up with some of the same sort of creative ideas that I normally had been able to until literally like the day the distributor took the movie from us. Then I just felt like all these, you know, creative thoughts were sort of like unleashed because I didn't have this weight on my shoulders anymore. So I know it's a big problem for creative people because we're our own worst critics. Nothing that we do is perfect. There's things in this movie that, you know, I could have done differently. I could have done better. I could have enhanced this, that, whatever, but you can't beat yourself up. Finish it, put it out there. We made a movie for $25,000 in 9 days. The fact that all these people are watching it and liking it, I think, is like a miracle. So, you know, that's my only, you know, parting advice. And, you know, again, I just want to thank you guys as well as, you know, the other members of our team, Katrina, who I think is still here, and everyone, our whole cast and crew, just for like making this thing happen. You know, Jen, who's sitting beside me, we worked together on like so many different like angles of this film, and, you know, in a really unique capacity where she was able to see the edit from a really great perspective and help inform choices. And, you know, we were painting our house while we were filming the movie, and you know, she was pregnant, which nobody knew, so we were like juggling 1,000 things at the same time while trying to make this little movie. So, you know, she's a big part of the reason this thing is done, along with you guys. And again, just want to thank all of you so much. Anyone watching this, a reminder, if you can, please rate and review the movie on Amazon. I don't want to sound like a total broken record, but it is the #1 thing that you can do to help this movie thrive. The more reviews we get, the more Amazon kicks us up. Last I checked, I think here in the US, we were like in the top 50 for mystery and suspense, and it just keeps climbing. So if you guys are able to leave a quick review, just a few words, like the movie, whatever you want to write is okay. That really does go a long way. And as I mentioned before, I'm doing a giveaway for the people that leave a comment and a response review. So I'm going to give away a camera package and all this other stuff. So you guys hopefully enjoyed it. Hopefully we'll leave a review, a few of you. But if not, I just thank you regardless for joining us here, asking your questions, and following along so far. So thank you. I'm going to flash everyone on the screen one more time. Matteo, if you want to wave bye, you might be frozen on my screen, but
there we go.
Bye from Italy, from Matteo.
Right.
Steph, thank you so much for joining us. Brandon, and thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you soon. Stay tuned on my podcast too. We're going to have Steph on next week, and lots more to come. So we'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.